Oh, yeah, that'll do it. All right. What the kind of area of interest for the live stream is this for people who are interested in kind of 3D modeling and SL? What's the kind of area of interest for the live stream? Is this for people who are interested in modeling and SL? Yeah. Okay, sounds good. Okay, so let's see. I was just talking about HTTP viewer out in our. I'll check it out if you want. There are various other viewers as well that are kind of other people's bailiwicks, but yeah, one that people mention is the Alex Ivy, which is still coming along. I've heard good reports about performance, especially on Mac with that, but haven't tried it out myself. Let's see what else. We started doing a bit more research into this Bakes on Meshes project. Trying to scope out the requirements. I think some people may have noticed we've been changing the status on some Jiras and doing some linking and stuff. There's no project actually underway now, but we're doing a little more digging into it. One question related to that I thought I might run by the group here is the question of which textures need to be baked. The idea here is that this gives you a replacement for the kind of onion avatars, and that you do it by applying your avatar's baked textures instead. But the avatar baked texture is just the diffuse texture, right? That's all it's supported for the system avatar. So we've got the diffuse texture, but we don't have normal maps or spec maps. And currently, the baking server doesn't know anything about materials. It can't bake normal maps or spec maps. So I'm curious, how that would fly with people who are trying to replace onion avatars. Are most of these things basically just using the diffuse avatar textures, or are they also trying to do stuff with the materials? Uh-huh. Well, it wouldn't override the materials, but I guess if it's intended as a replacement for having to explicitly model a bunch of layers of meshes, then to get the normal map stuff to look right, you would also need to have a baked normal map, right? If you could just apply your existing avatar baked textures onto a single mesh, then you wouldn't have the same you wouldn't get the same kind of layering effect for the other material properties. Say you've got a leather that has some kind of a nobly leather texture that's deposed by a normal map, and that goes over your your lame shirt that has a specular map and so forth, and so you get that stuff right. If you're just applying it all on a single mesh, then you would need to be compositing the material textures too, wouldn't you? Uh huh. Yeah, that's what I'm really trying to understand. I don't I don't feel like I understand the typical use well enough to say whether this is a must-have or not. I mean, ask people, would you like to include materials? Say yes, but if you're talking about something that's take a fair amount of time to implement and correct whether we even tackle the feature at all, then you really need some kind of a question for you really need some kind of a call on the priority is and how many people would benefit from that. Well, I guess everything's possible if you're willing to work on it long enough. Exactly how hard it would be, I'm not sure. The problem right now is that it's not just the baking service doesn't know how to handle those other textures, but also the wearables themselves don't contain those textures, right? So currently there isn't any way to define a normal map for your shirt or your jacket or whatever. So, to actually support that completely, you would have to change to extend the definitions of the underlying clothing items as well. Yeah, so it's not, and the question isn't to change the appearance of the base avatar itself. It's more a question of whether there's a way to use the baked avatar, whether there's a way to use material textures that are defined in the avatar's wearables to get something that can be applied to a mesh. Yeah. Tiberius, yeah, that's basically the idea. There are various proposals to allow bakers, that currently can only be applied to the system avatar, to also be applied on the meshes, and so uh, at a minimum that would require some changes uh, to the properties of the meshes themselves to be able to specify that that's supposed to happen, but it probably also implies some changes to the service that does the baking itself, at least probably to get the resolution. There's if most of the existing if most of the existing content out there is N24, then it'd be hard to keep the current baking limit of 512, for example. So the scope on the idea, you mean like what's included in the project? That's kind of what we're in the process of trying to figure out, and we've gotten a lot of good suggestions about that at these meetings, which is why I'm bringing it up now. But yeah, the intent is that for at least where people are currently using layered meshes, they would be able to use bakes on a single mesh instead, or at least a smaller number of meshes, and that should be able to that should lower rendering costs and improve content efficiency a lot. Probably say, let me back up a second. I don't think I got all of what you were saying. Okay, so you're saying that people are mostly compositing stuff at the skin level rather than trying to kind of factor in the clothing part as well. Yeah. Okay. That's good to know. Yeah, I suppose the spec maps and normal maps would be less useful if you're just talking about the skin layer. If people are wearing a lot of different types of mesh clothing, though, it does seem like that's a potential win if you could collapse that into a single layer. Maybe that's just a less common use case. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess for skin tightening, which of course is what we have for the system avatar, would kind of come along for the ride for free. So if you've got underwear or other kind of skin tight uh, layers, even if all of your clothing, then you could bake that up, and then um, you wouldn't need to model it in the mesh. Yeah, which is the bigger load, textures or geometry? Yeah, I don't know. People certainly have a lot of certainly there's a lot of content out there that loads things up in both areas. It may depend on your particular graphics card as well. No, I don't think so. I mean, we already have a mechanism for doing the baking where, there's a thing called the baking service, which uh, looks at your avatar and figures out, what all your clothing layers are, what your skin definition is, and what your uh, what layers of tattoos and underwear and shirts and all that stuff you have, and then composites it all, bakes it all into a single texture for each body region, and then just sends you a URL and says, okay, you can get your texture at this URL, and then you just fetch that by HTTP. So we already have this mechanism for those textures need to be updated and sending them to the viewer. What we don't have is a way to apply those onto mesh objects, right? The only thing you can do with them right now is to apply them on a system avatar if you're using a non-mesh body. Yeah, mesh HUD is an interesting question. And all of the baking now is all based on body region. There's, head, eyes, upper torso, lower body. I think there's a separate layer for the sort of system screen. So all told, you've got 5 or so textures that the baking system make. It doesn't know about other regions or arbitrary regions. You can't just go tell it, hey, go take these textures and composite them for me. But you could imagine people using the using some existing body region that they're about for a HUD, or conceivably we'd want to add support for additional regions. Mesh bodies can't use wearable alpha masks. Yeah, that is a point. We really need a way to hide, and we've talked about this in past meetings. We need a way to hide the system avatar other than using an alpha, right? So you'd have to leave your wearable alphas off and then have some other way to say, okay, I want to apply bake textures to my mesh object, and I don't want the system avatar competing with that, so make it go away. So yeah, I mean, it seems like a project that we've got some potential uses for. Certainly going to be a bit of work, and it also requires us to make changes to the baking service, which hasn't been modified in quite a while. So that adds a bit of complexity to the whole thing. Let's see, somewhere way back in the scroll, somebody was saying they had a question, which may not be bake related. Who did we miss? Anybody want to chime in with any other questions?
I had a couple of questions. I actually had 3. The first one was, is there any possible way in the default editor, this isn't for rigged mesh, this is for any objects that aren't attached to you or whatever, that, like, for example, taking an object and having multiple different layers for the base diffuse that allows for ambient occlusion or baked lights or shadows to be layered on top of a repeatable texture. Now, there's ways around it right now, but they're not like a consistent thing that works all the time.
Any way to do that? It's one of the things that people have asked for at various times, but I think currently you can just specify a single big texture, or a single texture for the diffuse.
Okay. The next question is there anything in the pipeline about animated collada files so we can put short animations to mesh?
Yeah, I think there's actually sort of 2 questions baked in there. One is, are we going to be able to have some way to animate meshes? And the other thing is, are we going to be able to do it by way of animated collada files? We've had some discussions about the possibility of playing, the animations we already have on rigged meshes that aren't actually attached to an avatar, and there's we could pursue that. People are interested in PCs and various other things that aren't actually part of your own avatar. And we've had some discussions about, and hope we'll get a chance to explore that, in the distant future. But we'll see. In terms of actually through the collada files, I'm not as sure that we do that since we already have another mechanism for specifying animation. Whatever cons, at least it's a kind of an established standard, and it's likely that we can continue animations through the same mechanism if we did try to extend.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, last question.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll be here next week. Let's see. You had a question. If you're to make an NPC object, would it be able to attach other things than a rig mesh? You mean like static objects? Your NPC wants to wear a ring or something like that? Yeah. Yeah. At this point, the notion of NPCs or animated objects is just in the discussion stage, so we don't, there's not any definite spec for what it would or wouldn't include. But yeah, I can see there would be a lot of cases where you would want to be able to combine, multiple things. You might like when you're modeling an avatar, you might want to be able to have bodies and clothing and some static object like a hat or whatever, and all sort of working together the same way an avatar does. Oh, yeah, last question. Fire away.
So, I don't know if this is actually true or not, but someone told me that the actual Second Life water is a combination of two textures and normal maps, and then its reflectivity and all that. Was there ever talk about being able to give out that specific data so we could apply that in any face? That way we can actually move Linden water onto any object that you would be able to, if I made a pond, it wouldn't be the Linden water. It could just take that specific data and apply it to a face or something, or put a toggle where you select a face and
yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the details of how Linden water is implemented. Since we've had it for a long time, I suspect that it's implemented in a kind of a special purpose way that's not connected to the materials system, which is recent. And I don't know how easy or hard it would be to try to apply anything else. Currently, I think it's probably just its own thing, kind of implemented in its own way.
a really good technique of basically having a rotating specular and normal map. Sometimes that go different directions that can kind of make a water effect, but nothing that ever touched Linden water.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, if I get a chance to poke around in the code a bit, I might be able to find out a little more about how the Linden water works, but I've never had the occasion to really do anything with it. Yeah, mirrors definitely make me nervous. I know when the first 3D games were coming out, 20 plus years ago, that was one of the conspicuous absences was, oh gee, there's a bathroom with a mirror, but you can't actually get in it. And if you look at the same game, or the descendants of the same game today, the mirrors still don't work. So if nobody has decided that they can implement the mirrors in a way that they can afford in all that time, then it seems like it might be a bit of a deep dive.
The I when I was working with running with scissors on Postal 2 Paradise Lost, the Unreal 2.5 engine actually can do mirrors pretty decently. I mean,
Oh,
like
cool.
it does it per like room, so when you leave that room, everything disappears. But you have to set it in a volumetric area. It's pretty awesome. It's the only like you'll see Duty 5 or whatever thousand it is on right now, and they don't have mirrors, but old Unreal 2.5 has.
Yeah, I'm not sure how does it, but obviously being able to put kind of holes in your link to other parts of the environment also has some of the same implications as in. Yeah, I'm sure if we had support for mirrors in Second Life, nobody would use it in a way that would cause an undue load on the system in any way.
Maybe in an empty sim just playing around. God, that would be so cool. A hall of mirrors. Just put a specular map and make it like hazy, or that'd be cool if you could like bend the prem and it would bend the mirror.
We should rewrite everything to use ray tracers first. All right. Well, I don't have any other specific agenda items for this week, so we can chat about whatever people want to. Edu, what do your people want to know more about? PBR tears? Are you talking about trying to add more uh, physical properties to the calculations? Yeah, perhaps Blue Ribbon could be good. Yeah, I guess the short answer is we really haven't had a lot of discussions about physically based training. Obviously there's various directions we could push the current engine to try to be more, more photorealistic or support for more, more complicated texture layering or more physics or whatever. But we don't have anything currently underway in those departments. Yeah, it would be a change to the graphics engine, I'm sure, to do those kinds of things.
I always thought something I thought first came out a long time ago is how cool it would be if you could like a sim and bake the sims so lights kind of like in Unreal when you make a sim you can actually bake the lights and scene and the entire scene is baked out and you see your lights and shadows and everything is into the objects, kind of like you were talking about earlier when you were baked the diffuse. I would if that was ever possible. Kind of like Blue Mars, I think did or whatever. Well, you have, I mean, your skybox would still do the majority of the work, and you could just change the, if we had access to be able to change the skybox texture, the big dome around us right now, and then the ability to have those lights and then have like local lights, which the projectors would be independent from that, and then you'd have area lights would actually bake to it.
So what does this ultimately get baked into? The kind of the diffuse textures that get applied to everything?
Yeah, that's the whole problem. It's like from what it does is it saves all that data to the actual object. So you then have to you have a light map of the entire sim. Everything, all prims, everything has this huge light map. And yeah, you would have to bake anytime you move something. You would have a shadow map left over, and you'd have to rebake the sim if you had that thing turned on. It's some theoretical idea. I thought it would be really cool, but
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that would be cool. Uh, certainly making big changes to the graphics engine is it's just it's a hard thing to tackle at this stage uh, in the Second Life code base, but it's also the fact that we have a very it's very flexible. People can make new items and move them around at will, and so you don't have the degree of control that you have if for a game, if somebody's making a level or something, and you can make it once and bake it once, and then you've got your light map information. Here it's you don't really have any constraints on how often stuff would have to be updated. So I would think that would be another challenge for SL.
it could be like my old neighbor who used to restart his sim every night.
Yeah, well, that's true. That could be one way to do it. Is just you've got some periodic schedule that this stuff gets updated.
Of course, that just takes more effort, more server time, and more resources.
Yeah, it's the pathfinding works kind of like that. It's gets updated every so often. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I suspect that the answer is just historical. That at the time the attachment were getting defined, we didn't really have the idea of fitted mesh. People weren't using the volume bones the same way that they do now. Of course, you couldn't change the definition for the existing bones now, but I suppose you could conceivably add new attachment points that were parented that way. Well, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that any change you make, it's going to break somebody's content, whether or not it's content that anybody foresaw at the time that the skeleton was created. I mean, you change the parenting, and then there's something that's moving uh, the breast volumes around, and suddenly the attachment isn't the same place it used to be, and people are complaining. I mean, adding new attachment points that are defined differently would not be a huge change as these things go. I think adding attachment points, it's more a question of it's more just a question of UI. You don't want to have all these giant menus that you have to traverse every time you try to do anything to attachments. I mean, you kind of already have giant attachments, but everything you add makes them gianter. Don't break the loops. I think you're saying you wanna shake him, not break him. Is that right? There's a question a little ways back about supplemental animation. Are you talking about the kind of auxiliary animations that play alongside the override? Yeah, that's another thing that we're in the kind of playing and kicking around stage. I hope we'll have things in a little more kind of definite staged set of projects in the not too distant future. We've been having some discussions about that one.
I actually wasn't talking about like baking the sim console over. It was more of a you build it how you want it, and then you bake it. I don't know, 15 everywhere, and they're not real-time shadows, but they would be of all the static objects.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, you have to rebake it anytime you change the
Time you change it.
overall layout. You know, put down a new header, big rock, or something like that, right?
Someone
Shade light.
would actually you would do it in like parcels, like a
overall
parcel would be its own
layout.
thing. If you had the whole sim, of course you'd have the whole sim, but if you just wanted to do your parcel, you actually do just the section that they're it'd be real time. It's impossible to do that. Well, improbable. Impractical. You have real-time shadows from some things. The area light will create shadows, but one thing I've actually wondered is why the light will penetrate and go through two walls. For example, if I was to put a light in a box and then put another prim outside of it, you'll see the light effect come through the wall and then hit the second wall. It won't occlude. And that's something that I think it does it on area lights, but it will stop on spotlights, I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that works currently.
I wasn't talking. I don't know where you got environmental map bakes. I don't know.
Lex, question on rigged mesh LODs. Sorry, explain what you're shooting for there. Oh, okay, sorry, I haven't seen the note card. Looking at the note now, I'm not sure what you mean about the non-LOD collapsing bug. Is this just choosing the wrong LOD? You're not going to the lower LODs when you should be? Okay, yeah. So, basically where we are, we're working on the data collection process for updating the rendering cost calculations. Basically need to get a lot of stats about various aspects of whatever avatar people are currently wearing, and then measure the actual performance of the avatar in world over some fairly large number of frames, and then do this with a bunch of differently configured avatars to try to pin down the appropriate costing for all of these various aspects. So what we've worked on for a while is just kind of creating the infrastructure for collecting and then creating kind of reference models so that we have appropriate things to exercise the system. So it's basically we're in the kind of defining how to collect the data stage of the project. Once we have that in place, then we're going to be doing some testing on different systems and trying to kind of collate that to come up with kind of the most reasonable update for this stuff. Yeah. Okay, so you're saying a rigged object that doesn't actually care about being animated is able to get an advantage versus a non-rigged mesh because of this bounding box issue? Yeah. Okay. No, that's a good one. I'm pretty sure this is in our set of JIRAs that we're looking at, but I'll make sure that it's linked if not. Okay, thanks, Polycell. Yeah, well, that's certainly not the intent. I don't want people to be, and of course, you know, if you change the rules, people find some new way to game the new rules. But clearly, the intent isn't that you get an advantage by using a rigged mesh, since those are inherently more expensive. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the links. So anyway, I guess we're just about out of time. The answer is that we're still in the early stages on this in terms of making sure we're collecting the right information and that we have the relevant jurors. But we'll keep you posted as this continues to progress. Yeah, the ideal goal is that the render and cost function accurately reflects how much load there really is to projects, and clearly there's a lot of places where it's not being computed accurately. That's why we're tackling the project in the first place. And it's probably not perfect after we update it either, but certainly the hope is that it will be as now. Yeah, I can't really say whether it'll stop at ARC. The advantage with ARC is that you can update without breaking the world. If you change land calculations, then you've got the risk that all stuff gets returned to the owners and generates a great deal of unhappiness. All right. Well, I think we're about at the hour. We should probably wrap it up for this week. So yeah, well, if you get a chance to try out the AssetHttp thing, let us know how it goes, and otherwise we'll keep you posted on other projects as they come along. All right. Well, bye all till next week, and bye to all you people out in